Hey guys, it's Roderick, and I'm here with the primer for season 13 of The Real Housewives of New Jersey. Now, I've been very excited about this because I only allow myself to kind of watch this reality television show. So I'm really excited. I want to do a primer before season 13 comes up so that way we can discuss kind of how we got here, who we like, how I'm feeling about certain people, so that then when the first episode comes out on February 7th, then we could just go straight into it without like a whole lot of backstory and that type of thing. So welcome to this channel. If you're new, this is where we discuss television, films, movies, and this only reality television show with the eye towards filmmaking, acting, and screenwriting. So let's get into it because, like I said, I've been very excited about Real Housewives of New Jersey because of all the Housewife franchises. New Jersey just kind of has a special place in my heart. For backstory, I started watching The Real Housewives back in its inception. For those of you who don't remember, the Real Housewives franchise started off as kind of like a spoof of the ABC television show Desperate Housewives. So we started off with OC, and then that's where everything just kind of bloomed, right? So, I started watching OC, then, New Jersey, then Atlanta. Then came all the other ones, Potomac, Miami, all the other different iterations. But I've been in Beverly Hills, because I really like Beverly Hills up until after Eileen Davidson left. And we'll kind of, maybe I'll talk about that towards the end as like the little bonus thing of why I don't watch Beverly Hills anymore. But those are the ones. But I kind of consistently watch New Jersey because New Jersey always kind of gave me exactly what I needed. And I also learned a lot of life lessons watching, New Jersey. Because watching these reality television shows and seeing these people kind of go through these things will really make you check in on yourself and see and check in on your emotional intelligence and how exactly, is this how I look in life? Is this how I, deal with conflict or whatever? So let's get started. So the things about New Jersey that I really like is the fact that when the show started off, when it was Teresa, Dina, the Carolyn Manzo, Jennifer Manzo, Danielle, it was a very interesting group because it was this kind of enclave occurring in, the enclave of Franklin Lakes, I think it's called, in New Jersey, that they all kind of started off with. And it was very raw, right? If you go back and watch those first few seasons of New Jersey, it's very, very raw, but it was also very authentic, and I really can appreciate that. And then as we moved on, with getting Teresa and the table flipping scene, for example, that is a life lesson, right? Because the fact is that when Teresa, first of all, if you watch the episode, you will see, or the clip really, Teresa does a test flip before she actually flips the table. So she does a test flip to see if the table is going to flip, and then she flips the table, right? And first of all, life lesson number one. If anybody flips a table on you and you still deal with them in your life, do not be surprised about what they do because they've already shown you who they are, right? So everything after Teresa flipping the table, I can't get mad at anybody else for dealing with Teresa the way she was because she flipped the whole ass table on them, right? What else are you gonna expect? So then over the seasons, we got her cousin, we got Rosie, and then her brother Melissa came in. And I really think that really changed the dynamic for the good because you got to see Teresa's interactions with the family and whatever. And we'll get to kind of Teresa and the whole thing, but I really, really like the Gorga Giudice situation. And then, so I really, really liked, I feel for the most part, for the 12 seasons, most of the cast has really brought their authentic, true, and real lives to it. And I think that's been something that's been really good. One of the things I have not been a fan of, however, is there are some segments where the show seems to be kind of overproduced or full storylines and cast members who kind of stay on the cast without bringing anything to their, bringing anything to the actual series, right? They're just there just to really sing a backup, and I call them the doo-wop cast members, right? They're just there just to kind of doo-wop, but they're not really adding anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be conflict, but they're not really adding anything to the actual narrative or the arc of the storyline, and they are not changing, right? If you look at them and see where they are when they first start, and then where they are, where we see them now, there's been no change. Because what you have to remember is reality television slash docu-series slash real-time drama has its origins in watching real people go through real life situations, right? So if you think about the first reality television series, The Real World, and you go back and watch that first Real World series, that is authentic, perfect, great reality television, right? Because you had 7 people who were just going through life as they interacting with each other, no artificial situations, no producers overproducing them, and we got a really interesting look at how these people do. Now, so I would say like maybe the first 5 seasons of The Real World were really, really good, right? And then after we get past, like, I would probably say Paris, maybe Seattle, that's when things kind of like went off the rails. Like Hawaii is when I was just done with The Real World because you could tell it was being overproduced and fake, right? Like Ruthie was drinking too much and everybody was sitting around worried about Ruthie. And I was like, in The Real World, they just been stepping over Ruthie's drunk ass, right? Like who's really caring about some drunk ass person who you don't know, right? But we could tell that that was an overproduced moment to try to generate some type of thing. And that's when I kind of like fell off with The Real World. So with The Real Housewives, the theory is that if you get this group of friends, and I use that air quotes with air quotes because a lot of them aren't really friends, they're like kind of coworkers. But if you put these 5 to 7 women together from a certain socioeconomic background and watch them follow their lives, that should generate some very interesting things. Coupled with the fact that Bravo, the Real Housewives franchise is aspirational marketing, right? So that's another thing. They pick women, locations, and scenarios in which these women can show off a lot of their wealth, right? So it's all about aspirational marketing, aspirational life, kind of like the people who sit and watch and read like People magazine and like celebrities are just like us or all that, all those type of things. It's really for that type of demographic, right, of people. So, which makes it very interesting because if you look at the Housewives on the scale, putting like Beverly Hills, Dubai at like the richest, and then who's the poorest? I'm not gonna say, I have my theories, but whatever. And then you have like New Jersey folks somewhere in the middle to the left, because they're not rich, right? So what I mean is the castmates who are working for the check, all the poor ones, the castmates who can whose check money goes to buy them clothes, who can leave this show and it does not affect their income, those are the rich ones. And I think that you can look at the franchise and be able to determine which cast cumulatively falls within the rich category and which cast falls within cumulatively the working for a check. And the series and the franchises where the castmates are working for the check tend to be the ones that are overproduced, right? Because they're actually creating drama, coming up with storylines, as opposed to rich people just doing rich shit, right? Like, and then there's gonna be drama because we're rich and it doesn't really matter, right? I'm not thinking about my brand. I'm not thinking about how this is gonna play out on social media. You're just doing rich shit because you could do rich shit. And I think that the shows that kind of fall in that category of the franchise end up being the better shows. Because the shows where the people are working for the check, the shows where the castmates, if they took away this check, they wouldn't have anything, and they're working, trying to create drama, kind of trying to create conflict, end up being the lesser quality shows. That's just my personal opinion. So New Jersey kind of falls somewhere this way, right? Because, and then with the exception of probably Jennifer, Aiden, most of the other castmates, like, I mean, I'm not saying they'll be broke without the Housewives' money, but they wouldn't really have the same lifestyle they would have, right? So that's the test. If you take away the Housewives' check, what will happen, right? And so New Jersey kind of follows cumulatively kind of towards the poor side because everyone's working for this check. To now what makes it interesting is that Teresa, now having married Louis or whatever, him declaring at the end of last season, you ain't got to work, you got to do this. Maybe cumulatively that's why I put them somewhere in the middle to this way. Because before, Teresa was working for this check. She has 5 kids. She has, all this restitution she has to pay. She had this big ass house. So Teresa was working for a check. And I don't want to, whatever, and so is the rest of them. So again, I think, like I said, it kind of skews more when you're not working for a check as opposed to when you are working for the check. So the other thing about Real House New Jersey that I think has made the show not as good is as in any narrative form, whether it be docuseries or fictional, right, you have to have a foil or counterbalance, right? And I think I talked about this in some of the other shows where when you have, if you think of a fictional show, you know, I think the people who follow me who watch Handmaid's Tale, right? When you have a fictional show and you have all the bad people running rampant over all the good people and there's no counterbalance to the show, there's no balance to the show becomes very hard to watch because the bad characters, the antagonists, are constantly just doing whatever they want, and then the protagonists are just constantly being victimized by whatever the antagonist is doing, right? So as you're using that kind of situation, you have to kind of have the same thing in reality television / docuseries, which is why there's always going to be a villain, I use that air quotes, who's going to be edited that way to be the antagonist for the series in order to create some balance, right? So the problem is with New Jersey, there's no protagonist or balance to Teresa's antagonism to being the antagonist, right? So every new person that comes onto the show, they try to be an antagonist or try to counterbalance Teresa, end up being obliterated, right? Because there's no one really who can really who can really create a balance within the show. Think about the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and the seasons you had Yolanda Foster and Lisa Vanderpump. Those were the good seasons because during those times you had two kind of like, you know, two different balancing camps, right? You had Yolanda Foster, you had Lisa Vanderpump, and they were not overtly antagonistic to each other until the famous Munchausen situation happened, which if you remember that whole situation, that kind of when the Lisa slip kind of started to show. But that's a paradigm, right? You want to have one person who's just as equally good, powerful, rich, persuasive, influential with another person, and one be the antagonist and one be the protagonist, and then that's kind of how it works out. So let's dive into the cast members, so that way when we get into this new review, you have to wonder why I feel a certain way about certain people and whatever. So one of the things, so let's start off with the news. So Jackie Goldschneider or whatever isn't coming back this season. Good. I wasn't a Jackie fan, right? I felt that Jackie came on the show and she committed one of the biggest cardinal rules that ended up making her just really bad, is that she came in and stuck her nose in family business, right? Jackie comes in as a friend of Melissa's, and then during one of Teresa's mini tirades and trying to run down Melissa, Jackie sticks her nose in the conversation and tries to stick up for Melissa. I recognize that Jackie was trying to stick up for her friend, but at the end of the day, that's family business, and that was none of your business, right? You should have just sat there and ate your food, and then afterwards, you should have been like, Melissa, does this happen all the time? Melissa, what's going on? What's the deal with this? But because also the pay structure of the Housewives is that they only get paid based upon the episodes they show up on television, therefore, there's an incentive for them to show up to go to trips and to generate conflict, right? Because if there's no conflict and you're not part of it, then you're more likely not going to get paid, right? So I just didn't like the way that Jackie kind of jumped in with that whole situation with Melissa. I thought Evan, her husband, he was, fine, her kids, whatever. Her whole anorexia situation, I thought that was a very touching, real, and authentic moment. However, I don't know why she's not on the show, but I would hope that it's because she decided that she wanted to be healthy and get healthy, and being on the show would have interfered with that, right? Because during the last season 12, when she goes to see the doctor, and they're like, well, we have an inpatient situation that we can help you with, and she chooses the outpatient and then uses the excuse that she doesn't want to be with her kids, everyone knew, it's like, no, it's that you couldn't be on the show anymore. Right? So I don't know whether, and I don't want to say that that's the reason, but that's what it sniffed to me. Because if it was that important to you, right, why did you not choose just to do the outpatient situation? So anyway, I was like, oh my God, I just burned myself. So anyway, I was just like, okay, whatever. So, good, Jackie's done. So now we get two new castmates, Rachel Fuda and Danielle Carl. So I kind of watched the trailer. I don't remember really like who was who, but I was like, well, let's see, right? Because as I've said, becoming a new cast member on this show is pretty difficult because you either have to take one of two positions. You have to either be pro Teresa or anti-Teresa. And coming in anti-Teresa does not work because Teresa goes for distance and she goes for pain, right? And she could literally go without really caring about who else gets hurt in the collateral damage. So new women have not figured out yet how to come in, stake out a middle ground, suss it out, collect some allies, and then determine whether or not you're going to be pro or whatever. Because the show just doesn't allow that for you to happen, right? So Teresa can pretty much just like your first little taping, she's gonna figure out if you're with her, if you're not with her, and if you're not with her, she is literally gonna scorch the sun and burn you to a crisp until you submit, until you leave, or until you acquiesce, right? So I wish all of those new ladies the best of luck. Hopefully they'll surprise me, but maybe they will end up having some gusto or someone who can really create some balance to the show, because I think that's really what we need. So let's get to the cast base right over, okay? Let's start with Jennifer, right? Because I think Jennifer has the most potential out of all the castmates to really be a dynamic castmate for this franchise, because she doesn't need the money, and her whole life situation is so interesting that it kind of fits in with that kind of like aspirational demographic kind of like simpy white woman type of shit, right? Because Jennifer comes onto the show, she has this big house, she's flaunting it, she has a basketball court or whatever, and immediately Jennifer made a decision. She's like, look, I'm gonna end up being Teresa, friend. So Jennifer gives you Gretchen Wiener's energy, right? Which, you know what? Gretchen Wiener survived to the end of the show, right? So Gretchen Wiener's energy, that's what Jennifer gives, because she just didn't have enough allies to kind of like make an embankment to be anti-Teresa. And she also may have just generally like what Teresa gives, because better for worse, Teresa gives head bitch energy, right? So, and Teresa always going to have Dolores as her capitan in the side, and Jennifer just isn't built for that type of shit, right? She's not built like Teresa and Dolores to get gutter butt and dirty and whatever like that, right? So Jennifer made the strategic decision that she's going to be team Teresa and whatever, and I think that worked out. The problem with Jennifer is that she just came off very superficial that first season, and then in the subsequent seasons, when it was like with her, and so she really didn't have anything interesting to her. So when someone made the comment about their arranged marriage with her brother, she got in her feelings. We're like, it is. Oh, they called her sister-in-law a mail order bride, and she got high key offended. I was like, duck looks like, walks like, waddles. I was like, I mean, that may be an offensive term, but it's an arranged marriage. So what are you thinking? So whatever like that. So I was like, whatever. And the way she went at Marge, I was like, for previous seasons, about being like, having cheated on her husband and with Joe, whatever, only to reveal that the reason she was so upset is because her husband cheated on her. And the fact that she couldn't put that together shows that Jennifer has low emotional intelligence, right? And as a person with low emotional intelligence, they are great for reality television, because they're never going to use any bit of self-awareness to go in before they go out. Most great reality television stars go out and then never go in, or go Teresa, or other people, right? So so Jennifer has such low emotional intelligence, she can't really read the room, right? So your husband cheats on you, it gets exposed, you find out Marge told because you've been trying to ride her, and Marge is like, you ain't gonna ride me all motherfuckers all the time, right? So what happens is, instead of you going to Marge and being like, okay, I apologize, this is where this comes from, and then being like, what is it that I want my daughters to see? You're more concerned about your daughters finding out, right? And the problem is that you need to make sure your daughters don't turn into you, right? So I was like, okay, but again, Jennifer has the most potential. And I was like, okay, I like her, like I F's with her, like, I'll ride with Jennifer, but as long as she just doesn't give me too much Gretchen Wiener's energy, right? And I think that is what she kind of gives me, is just, she'll just take up and be like the second lieutenant, behind Teresa, just because she just wants to stay in the game, because she's like a girl who can't fight. If you're a girl who can't fight, then you can't be against the bully. I mean, that's just kind of what it is, right? Let's start down, we go to Dolores, right? And I really liked Dolores when she first came on this show, because I thought that Dolores was going to be the second iteration of Eileen Davidson. Now, if you did not watch The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, Eileen Davidson is an actress from Days of Our Lives and Young and Restless that was on for a couple of seasons. Her and Lisa Rinna were really good friends, right? And a lot of people didn't like Eileen because they thought she was boring, but Eileen brought an amount of realism and authenticity that I really enjoyed The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And Eileen was a very good friend to Lisa Rinna. When the Munchausen situation happened, if you go back and watch, they're sitting on the beach. Lisa Rinna goes to Eileen Davidson. Girl, we the whole Munchausen situation happened. I went and said it. Lisa Rinna told me to say it. Now it's this whole big hoo ha ha ha. Eileen was like, girl, how do you get your mess? Like, she literally want to be like, why did you get your mouth up in some mess like this? Like, you know this is not going to turn out well. What are you thinking, right? Eileen was that ride or die friend that was supportive, but also will call you on the carpet for your shenanigans, right? And I believe that half the reason that Lisa Rinna kind of went off the rails is because Eileen was not there, right? Because for the seasons that Eileen was there, she wasn't running off the rails and doing these type of shenanigans, right? And that was what I had the hopes for Dolores, right? I really hoped that Dolores was going to be that friend because her and Teresa have known each other for such a long time. But as I kept watching, I realized that she just rubber stamps a lot of Teresa's shenanigans, and she never really calls Teresa on the carpet for being ridiculous as she is. Now, it may be that Dolores knows Teresa so well that she knows that Teresa is not going to listen to her, but her calling Teresa on the carpet would generate enough interest and conflict that Dolores would have her business with some business. Because let's be clear, Dolores has not had any definitive or substantive storyline for a long time, right? Her whole storyline has been her emotional dependence on Frank, right? Because that's what, let's call that what it is. It's literally an emotional codependence, right? Her children are grown. You could be friends with your ex-husband, you could be friendly with your ex-husband, but the way her and Frank interact and their kind of dependence and interdependence is not going to allow Dolores to ever have a really healthy relationship, right? Because she's always going to have this kind of connection to Frank. So we see in the trailer that like Frank wants to come back and he wants to try it. Do I believe that? No. But it is possible because Frank is like a grown-ass fuckboy. And I like Frank, right? Like, I like Frank. Like, Frank is funny, whatever. But he's like a grown-ass F-boy. So I totally see why there may be some truth to that. So we'll see. I just really want Dolores to have a substantive storyline and not be constantly be the doo-wop behind Teresa's shenanigans, right? Because anytime there's something that happens, and people go to Dolores and say, why are you not talking to her? Dolores' reaction is, well, what am I supposed to say? What can I do? She's a grown woman. But then when she gets ready to get some 10 toes down in some mess, Dolores is right there behind her like Thundercats, ready to like come up and follow up, right? So I don't understand. Like, if she's a grown woman, to let her fight her own battles, don't be back there 10 toes behind her. But then when she's doing some ish, Dolores is always giving you the Egyptians that there's nothing I can do, right? So it kind of cuts both ways. So I was like, okay, now let's get to Marge, okay? Marge just had to grow on me, right? Because again, she just is kind of like, nyam, nyam, nyam. But what I can appreciate about Marge is that she is going to be who she is for better or for worse, right? And I have generally think that she kind of came into this series wanting to have a good experience with everybody on the show. And unfortunately, Marge has been the victim of coming in and being authentic and playing around with people who have hidden agendas. Teresa is about getting this check, okay? Teresa's like getting her money. She knows how to play this game just about better than anybody else on this show. So unfortunately, I think Marge kind of fell a victim to Teresa to check getting situations, right? And Marge is going to say what she wants, what she says, right? And even if she is friends with Teresa. And I think that Teresa is not used to having people in her life that tell her the truth and still say, I love you, right? Because again, not to skip ahead, Teresa has exceptionally low emotional intelligence, right? So she cannot process everything coming at her. She perceives it as a criticism or an attack, when sometimes that is not what it is, right? But because she just has low emotional intelligence and does not know how to communicate, and coupled with a whole host of other situations, it always comes out very combative, right? So Marge has been trying to be a friend to Teresa, right? And still be authentic to herself. And Teresa is like some deity in her head that requires unflinching, unquestioning loyalty. You know, we'll get to this when we get to Teresa, but that's what Teresa requires from people in her relationships, and it just doesn't work well with Marge, because Marge is like, I'm not always going to be going down with your Titanic all the time, right? And so when Marge decides to hop off the Titanic and paddle away, that's when she gets the ire of, you know, of Teresa. And if you look at this last season, the conflict between Teresa and Marge is actually trying to help Teresa out, right? If you watch Reunion, Marge says, I was asking Louis on camera about these situations so he could put his own spin on the situation. But because Teresa viewed Marge as asking these questions about the ex-wife and these allegations as an act of disloyalty, it was always some sense of acrimony, right? When the whole truth is, Marge is like, no, girl, I'm trying to help your man out, because if he could put his spin on it, then it makes it look better. But Teresa just was trying to shut it down. She just got mad at Marge. So anyway, I put Marge in a like category. I like Marge Sr. I like Joe. So Marge doesn't really, affect me that much. Now let's get to Melissa Gorga. Because, for years I thought, I had like low-key crush on Joe Gorga, thought he was super hot, whatever. Notwithstanding, right? If you want to say who is the true kind of like antagonist right now of this show, who's the true protagonist of this show, it's Melissa Gorga, right? Because Melissa Gorga is in the worst position of any of these women on this franchise, right? So remember when Melissa showed up on the scene of the series, she's Joe's wife, and Teresa's spreading all these horrible rumors about her and all this type of stuff. She used to be a stripper, she was a prostitute, whatever, blah, 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 right? So if you remember that season when Teresa, this is when Kathy and Rosie were on the show, and they all went to like the retreat with the therapist. It's the one where like Joe attacked Joe when the two Joes were fighting. The therapist said something that has always stuck with me. Because, again, I recognize truth when I hear it. The therapist is like, your problem with Melissa is that you didn't pick her out. You don't trust or have never trusted your brother to pick out the people in your life, to pick out the people in his life, right? Because Melissa didn't come from Teresa's clique of friends and Dolores' clique of friends. Joe picked her from outside that clique, and that has always been the problem, right? So Melissa is in a very difficult situation because there is a limit, just mentally, physically, emotionally, that Joe is going to come back or fight with his sister, right? Because Teresa can go for pain and distance, right? And that is now his only living relative. So Teresa will literally scorch the earth just to be right, and Joe will take that beating because that's his sister, And there is a limit. Now, Melissa wants to keep the peace, wants to keep the family together, but there's only so much beating that she could take from, she's going to take from Teresa, and Joe is not going to get involved because that's really wife, that's like woman-ish, and he's not getting that, and he knows that Teresa can go for distance and pain, right? So it's no win. So Melissa is constantly going to be at the whim of Teresa because there's no one's going to be able to stop her from just going for distance and pain. And Melissa is constantly has to be the better person for the sake of the family, for the sake of her husband, for the sake of the children and the cousins or whatever, which to most people would be like, great. But to Teresa, that's literally like an open football lane for her to run right into the end zone every time on Melissa, because Melissa is going to stand up for herself. Melissa is not going to allow herself to be badmouth, but Melissa does not have the endurance and the tenacity to go blow to blow with Teresa, right? Because at some point, Melissa stops and says, who is this helping? Who is this solving? I don't really have to deal with you. I don't know, whatever, right? But Teresa will go, can go for distance and pain, blow for blow for blow for blow. So I really think what I want to see this season is, I need the Gorgas to make a decision, right? Either you're gonna be like draw some hard lines in the sand with Teresa, or you're just gonna fight gutter to gutter with Teresa too and see how it goes on. Because right now it's like Teresa 15, Melissa 3. Because Teresa is just whooping up on Teresa all the time. And as we get to Teresa, we'll just talk about how Teresa demands unflinching, unyielding loyalty from her family and her friends, but will not reciprocate the same for the other people in their lives. When she kind of does that same Dolores-ish where she's like, yeah, I'm down with you, I'm down with you. But then when you have a situation, she's like, oh, I don't know. Oh, that's not me, or whatever, right? And those kind of unbalanced relationships just are ripe for frustration and disaster. So I really hope this season that we get the Gorgas fighting back, or at least drawing some sand, or have learned from all their years of experience with Teresa to learn how to somehow kind of cage her and deal with her, or just get to a place where you just see them in their prayer closet being like, you know what, Jesus, you're gonna have to take the wheel with her because I can't do that anymore, right? So that at least what my hope is for the Gorgas. So let's get to Teresa, because I really liked Teresa as a person on television, or television personality. I have liked her for so many years because I really like that authentic kind of, really loyal, like this is who I am type of thing. I had to get off the Teresa train when year after year after year, I just saw her just constantly abuse her family and her brothers and Melissa, but expect unflinching loyalty, right? And then I kind of felt bad because, when her mother passed, I recognized what happened with her in a relationship with Joe Giudice. She got sent to jail. And while she was in jail, her mother worried, her mother cried, her mother prayed, and then she got out of jail, and then her mother passed away. And she could never forgive her husband for taking away those years that she could have had with her mother. Because again, Teresa was as much of a hapless victim of this. It's like, did she know about it? Yeah. I think she just signed it because that's what her husband said to do. But I don't think that she could ever forgive her, Joe, for doing that. And as we watch over the years, and Teresa she's given birth on television, she's gone through bankruptcy, she's moved into houses. I can understand that when she met Louis, she was just kind of like, okay, enough's enough, right? You all have taken all of this from me, and I have shown up, but I want this to be unspoiled. The problem is, you're getting paid to show your life regardless if you want it or not, right? And because Teresa has such low emotional intelligence, she couldn't figure out and see that like Marge is really trying to help her out, because Teresa views any view or act of challenge as some sense of disloyalty, as opposed to, you can have people in your life who love you, who want the best for you, but they also cannot agree with the things that you do, right? So the thing is that Teresa has such low emotional intelligence, she can't distinguish that nuance and that difference. So therefore, every interaction is always super combative. And Teresa is in it for pain and punishment, right? Like, she can really go blow to blow, slug to slug with pretty much any of the other women in any other franchises, right? Because she just has that level of endurance. And once she gets mad enough, once Teresa hits that 10, right? It literally is like Hulk unleashed, right? And there's like literally, so the problem is that up against that level of fury, most people would just acquiesce to whatever she wants, just because that's the level of fury that she has. Now, Teresa, I will say, has gotten better over the years, right? But the problem is that since she's still working for a check or whatever, she still has to kind of start some ish all around. Like, I thought this whole thing with Marge last season was just ridiculous, because what does it matter, right? Like, it just, like, Teresa never stops to say, is this something I really need to be upset about, right? Knowing that you could pull up 7 other things that you could literally be upset about. But I don't feel like she ever picks and chooses her battles, appropriately, right? So I think that because Melissa is always going to be there and be a good scapegoat to her keep punching on, it's going to constantly be that every time, right? So until her brother pretty much has this come to Jesus with her, be like, you got one more with my wife, then I'm going to show you better than I could tell you what I'm about. And that needs to have that conversation. You know, I thought that whole scene with her daughter, Teresa's daughter, and Joe was one of the most disrespectful things I have ever seen on television. And I used to watch Love and Hip Hop, okay? That whole conversation was one of the most disrespectful things I have seen. To let your child talk to your brother, their uncle, the way that her daughter did, I thought was out of pocket. And then while we're on it, let's talk about Teresa. If her daughter is going to get confessionals and step in grown people's business, then her daughter can catch it just like Teresa can. Okay? I don't want to hear this, oh, she's a child, keep her out of it. No. If her child, I think Gia is her name, right? Yeah. If Gia steps in grown people's business, then Gia can get it just like, we call this the Brielle rule, right? If you want to step in and talk about stuff like your mama, you can catch it like your mama catches it, right? So I just don't like the way Gia kind of moves, kind of like the kind of Teresa symbiotic type of clone type of thing. So anyway, I just, and just the whole thing with her sitting like down with her daughter, and they both got boyfriends, they're talking like they're friends, and I don't know. But I also understand, right? You're in jail, you're divorced, you're trying to blend these families, more attention needs to be solved. I'm very empathetic and sympathetic to Teresa's situations. It's just that every time I give her an ounce of sympathy, she gives me a cup of BS, right? So now I'm just like, why am I getting this BS? Because every time I give you some sympathy, right? So now I don't know how much I'm going to have left for this season, right? Because Teresa has taken me through it for 12 seasons, right? So, and I'm not jumping on this roller coaster again. So I'm going to stand by, let people ride it, see what the ride is, and then determine whether I'm going to hop on this roller coaster or not, because I done got nauseous. I done threw up my cotton candy. I done lost my popcorn. My cell phone flew out riding this Teresa roller coaster. And I think I'm just about done because I need to see substantial change in her character, not a change in her circumstance. And those are two different things, right? That's where it produces character arcs. Change in your character, right? And for all the women, I need to start seeing that you've learned something from what you've been through, right? I need to see some compassion. I need to see some empathy. You can have conflict, but if you're gonna be on the same superficial whipsy BS, is this how you move it through life? So anyway, this is the primer. This is our starting off point. I'm so excited for, so I'm gonna do this. I'll try to have their videos out the day after or whatever like that. But if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit the alert button, like, subscribe, share, and I can't wait to see what this season is going to unfold, so it could be anything. So anyway, have a great night. Bye.